Welcome to Crossroads. The Chinese regime is working on a new program to train 3,000 police officers in other countries. Now, this is part of a push by the Chinese Communist Party to extend its influence in policing and global security. And according to a speech by Chinese State Councilor and Minister of Public Security Wang Xiaohong on Monday at the 2024 Conference of Global Public Security Cooperation Forum in Lianyungang, China, he says, is looking to take concrete actions to contribute Chinese wisdom and strength, I think he means CCP on that, to global public security governance. And what better way to contribute Chinese wisdom than to train thousands of police officers from other countries on the Chinese Communist Party's totalitarian tactics, right? Now, here's more on the program from South China Morning Post. Remember, under China's Alibaba. They say this: China will help train 3,000 foreign law enforcement officials over the next year to tackle global security issues and better protect Chinese interests beyond its borders. And that's the key part here, right? Protect Chinese interests, the country's public security minister said. And it said China will also send police consultants and working units to countries to help improve their law enforcement capacity, conduct joint patrols and investigations, and tackle cross-border crime, according to this individual. And notes as well that Beijing, the CCP, is seeking ways to boost its presence beyond its borders to protect overseas interests while offering an alternative to Western-led global security governance, meaning pushing back against the United States. And notes also that on Monday, Wang met security officials from Malaysia, Myanmar, Zambia, Nicaragua, and Russia, and told them that China, the CCP, was willing to cooperate in the fight against telecom fraud, drug trafficking, and other cross-border crimes, boost security along the Belt and Road infrastructure projects, the CCP's infrastructure projects, and offer criminal judicial help, according to state-run media Xinhua. And remember as well that when the Chinese Communist Party is offering to stop drug operations, the CCP is also fueling them on the other side, right? Now, here's a bit more on the details of what this entails, this whole global police push. South China Morning Post said this September of 2023, 1 year ago. China's top police chief has called on world powers to strengthen cooperation on public security as Beijing seeks to expand its influence in global governance. Now, they noted, again, a year ago, before the current one, that the need to build a network of cooperation on public security, this individual told the forum that with more resources and advantages, the CCP should take the lead in upholding fairness and justice in the international community. And here's the important part: take a stand against hegemony. Now, hegemony is, of course, a reference to American hegemony, and they say that America's security operations abroad, pushing back against human rights abuses and those things, represents American imperialism and hegemony. The CCP wants to unseat the United States as kind of the world government, the one that maintains order in the world, and they want to replace that with the CCP's model, again, the China model. So when they talk about fighting back against hegemony, they want the Chinese Communist Party to become the new hegemon. Now, they note that last year's gathering, organized by the China Association for Friendship, and this is important, is themed One World, Common Security. And notes that law enforcement officials and academics are among the more than 500 attendees from 50 countries and in regions including the United Kingdom, Russia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Egypt, and also organizations including Interpol. Now, there's a lot to dig into here, but first, the mention again of hegemony really details the CCP's kind of want for this. It's trying to create a new system of global governance, unseating the United States and replacing it with the Chinese Communist Party. And also the CCP's new operation to train these 3,000 foreign law enforcement officials announced during this year's one. There are several parts to this. One is the CCP's existing operations to get its forces deployed under the United Nations for so-called peacekeeping operations. Another ties into the CCP's influence over Interpol, which they do, by the way, I'll get into that. Now, this all stems from its Global Security Initiative, which the Chinese Communist Party launched in April of 2022. And there are several parts to this. One part is how this relates to the Chinese Communist Party's existing operations to get its forces deployed under the United Nations for what they call peacekeeping operations, the UN peacekeepers. The CCP is using that to bring its agents to other countries to carry out that role. It's using the United Nations as a vehicle for that. Another ties into the Chinese Communist Party's influence over Interpol, the international police, which the CCP has headed for a long time and even punished people before for not enforcing the CCP's interests through Interpol. And another is related to the Chinese Communist Party's agenda to create a new security group within the Eurasian region, something was pushing recently at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Again, tying into what we discussed before about the creation of the Eurasian Empire, controlling the Eurasian region. Now, look, this also ties in other projects, including the Chinese Communist Party's use of secret police stations. You might remember the news. The CCP was establishing these secret police stations in New York City and other parts of the U.S. and other countries around the world, running police operations openly in these countries in some cases, enforcing CCP's laws, harassing dissidents, while again trying to stay away from the normal authorities of the country. This is two sides of the same program. The role on the so-called China Association for Friendship, notably, we talked about before, that the China Association for Friendship ran one of their previous big movements on this with other countries. That would tie into something important because the secret police stations, they typically run through United Front operations. And those United Front operations typically go through Chinese Communist Party tongs. Tongs are like fraternal organizations or associations. And these often include names like the Friendship Association. And so it does appear the CCP is using these same networks as the secret police stations to also, again, use this global policing push. But here, this is also important because it relates not just to the CCP's operations to work with foreign police, right? The one they're announcing right now, or even agreements, notably, that allow the Chinese Communist Party to even just directly deploy their police to other countries. Now, The Guardian noted this. They said China, the CCP, will train thousands of foreign law enforcement officers so as to see the world order, quote, develop in a more fair, reasonable, and efficient direction, under the CCP, of course. And that's according to its Minister for Public Security. And it's that Beijing has linked the GSI, this new police program, to its brokering of agreements between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the development of its peace proposal for the Ukraine war. It is seen by analysts as a vehicle to reshape the current U.S.-dominated world order. Again, they're trying to topple the United States and what it represents. Topple the Pax Americana, the peace under America, and replace it with the Pax Sinica, the peace under China, the CCP's model for this. They don't look to get rid of hegemony. They want themselves to become the new hegemon. The GSI concept, notably it says here, appears to include a run of bilateral security and policing agreements made with developing nations in recent years, particularly in Africa and the Indo-Pacific. They note that this recent announcement suggests that number is increasing, with Wang, the head of that security organization, noting that China has already trained 2,700 foreign law enforcement officers in the past year. And again, these officers will be the ones who go and carry those trainings and teach others how to do it. The last week after a China-Africa forum, Beijing, the CCP, announced that it will train 1,000 more police enforcement officers for the African continent and jointly ensure the safety of cooperation projects and personnel. It was not immediately clear if those 1,000 officers are included in the 3,000 cited by Wang on Monday. Now, the agenda here is the push for, again, a multipolar world order, tying in again to this whole China model and tying again to what we discussed about the Eurasian Empire. The Russian government, whether it's, again, their interests or Chinese interests, they keep talking about the multipolar world order, the creation of this new world order. What does it actually mean? Well, the multipolar world order tends to refer to the destruction of what they call the unipolar world order. Unit one, right, being the United States. The peace under America would be defined as the unipolar world order. If you're going to create a multipolar world order, that means taking a global authority away from the United States, taking global power away from the United States, especially when it comes to like the ability to sanction and hold countries accountable for those types of, human rights abuses, and create a system of global shared governance. Again, what they call the multipolar world. It's no longer one nation having a voice. It's all the nations in the world having different regional representation, whether it's like the African Union or something else, coming together and having representation on a shared plane where the United States is just one of many powers. But the important part here is they're not looking to have an actual multipolar world. They still want a unipolar world, but it's under what they call the China model. Now, as this happens, the CCP is creating joint police patrols with other countries as well, and also with other global security pushes. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. Welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party has a new plan to train 3,000 law enforcement officials in other countries. Now, this is part of a push by the Chinese Communist Party to extend its influence over policing and global security all around the world for the new agenda for a so-called multipolar world order. Now, on the Chinese Communist Party's global policing proposal, there are many issues with it, as you might imagine. Now, remember where this all started. Now, this is part of a push by the CCP to extend its influence over policing and global security, and also for their agenda of a so-called multipolar world order. Now, look, on the CCP's global policing proposal, there are many issues with it, as you might imagine. And this seems to be where it really started. Now, remember, this goes back to 2022, and what happened right before that? Well, there was the issue the Chinese Communist Party had with Interpol, the International Police. That was in 2020. The former head of Interpol was Meng Hongwei, and he was purged by the Chinese Communist Party. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison, allegedly for taking bribes. But the real accusation going around, including publicly, was that he was punished for not representing the interests of the Chinese Communist Party through his role in Interpol. And the timing of that is important because it noted the CCP, through that, demonstrated an interest in controlling an international police force. They punished this individual for not using Interpol for that, for not allowing them to do it. Now, the timing was important because, again, this is the time the CCP allegedly launched some of its global policing operations. A lot of the things started planning around that time, and they kicked off right after. 2021, 1 year after that, the Chinese Communist Party was criticized for sending agents to Cuba to help train Cuban regime forces on how to crush protests that were beginning to take place there. Also, not long after that, 2022, when they started running this whole program, the CCP was having controversy over its security deals that it was making in the Solomon Islands. And that deal allowed the Chinese Communist Party to send its military and its police there, and also granted it the ability to base its warships there. Now, Italy, another example, they were infamously allowing the Chinese Communist Party to have its own police patrolling the streets of Italy. That program they had with the CCP on policing, that only ended in 2022. Now, a year later, 2023, the Chinese Communist Party ran into controversy in Thailand, and it was planning to hold joint police patrols. It was also planning to station its police in Thailand. That plan was eventually scrapped because of the controversy over that. And interestingly as well, just recently, the CCP announced that it was working with Serbian police for joint patrols in China. They're training them. And this happens right as Serbia just suddenly backs down on plans to supply Ukraine with fighter jets. And also the Chinese Communist Party is now competing with Australia on police operations all through the island nations in that region. The Chinese Communist Party is working on programs right now to have its police deployed to some of those countries, while Australia notably is trying to push back against that, and they're launching a cooperative policing program with these Pacific Island nations. They're viewing the CCP's actions as a type of incursion into that region, and they're trying to stop that from happening right now. Now, look, on the CCP side, this ties in with a whole slew of other projects. The police project is part of it, but it also includes infrastructure deals and defense deals. As they go into these countries, they work on other things as well. The Guardian said in July, "The Guardian examined agreements and partnerships covering security, defense, and policing with the 10 largest Pacific countries by population. They note that Australia remains the dominant partner in the region, accounting for more than half the deals identified, followed by New Zealand, the US, and China." It says the data shows more than 60 agreements and initiatives, including several infrastructure and equipment deals to support defense and policing in Pacific countries. And it's the interactive table, which it shows, sets out each agreement and can be searched by country or keyword. And more than half the agreements include a focus on policing, with an emphasis on training of Pacific police forces and donating equipment, a push that comes amid rising transnational crime and threats. And they note here that China has emerged as a new player in this arena, having developed nearly half a dozen initiatives to support policing in Pacific countries in recent years. And it notes that almost all the Pacific countries tracked have deals with multiple partners. Now, so what's the problem with that, right? It's just policing, right? Who cares, right? It helps stabilize countries, gets rid of crime. They're fighting against drug trafficking. Well, the important part is what police are in China, not what they are in the United States or other parts of the world. The Chinese Communist Party is one of the world's worst human rights abusers, and the police there are just arms of the CCP. The CCP's policing operations with other countries also means that those same trainings and a lot of the same operations and even some of the enforcement the CCP does are going to be seen in other countries. In fact, this is coming out. ADF magazine said in 2023 that in 2021, Kenya launched a program to send 400 police officers each year to China for training, despite concerns that China's authoritarian approach to policing conflicts with Kenyan laws protecting free speech and human rights. And notes that in recent years, China, the CCP, has signed policing agreements with 40 African countries to train thousands of law enforcement officers, presidential guards, and other non-military security officials. Together, it says, they make up about 35% of foreign security force receiving training by China's Ministry of Public Security, which I'll get into in a minute. Now notice the training has two goals. First, to introduce police officers to Chinese-style policing that emphasizes control of the population. And second, to create a police force that can help protect China's business and infrastructure abroad. And notice that China's emphasis in Africa has been on creating security with Chinese characteristics. A reference again to socialism with Chinese characteristics. Not Chinese traditionally, but the CCP. And this is focused, it says, on maintaining stability above all else. The survival of the party is the ultimate goal. And notice that China's no questions asked approach includes little concern about how countries ultimately use the training and equipment that they receive. And notes as well, critics argue China's influence on African policing spreads its brand of authoritarianism, which condones detaining and threatening dissidents, journalists, and others who challenge the government, a right that is crucial to democracy. So this type of brutal policing ties in with the Chinese Communist Party's so-called China model of government. This is one of the things the CCP is trying to export. And if the American model of liberal democracy is torn down, the China model will be the alternative for that. And what is the China model? The China model is a system of global governance that disregards human rights. You have no right to free speech, no right to freedom of gathering and so on, no right to have your own religious beliefs or your political views. The Communist Party, the ruling regime, holds ultimate power, and the interests of the regime go above all else, and they will crush anybody who dares question it or stand against it. That is the China model. And the policing trainings they're doing are training them on how to enforce the China model. It should be noted as well that the CCP's agency that works on this, that's the Ministry of Public Security. And that's important because the Ministry of Public Security, the one doing these police trainings, that's the same CCP branch that's running the secret police stations in other countries, including the ones that were operating in the United States and other Western countries. Now look, in 2022, a report came out from human rights group Safeguard Defenders exposing these operations, and that caused a lot of governments around the world to start taking actions against the CCP operation. And again, the timing is important. 2020, Interpol gets, purged, the head of Interpol. The CCP wanted to have a global police force. He wouldn't let him do it. They purge him. Right after that, 2021, 2022, all these other operations start up, working on global policing through other means. CNN said this, December 2022. It says Beijing has set up more than 100 so-called overseas police stations across the globe to monitor, harass, and in some cases repatriate Chinese citizens living in exile, using bilateral security arrangements struck with countries in Europe and Africa to gain a widespread presence internationally. A new report shared exclusively with CNN alleges. And notes that the group, Madrid-based human rights campaigner Safeguard Defenders, says it found evidence China, the CCP, was operating 48 additional police stations abroad since the group first revealed the existence of 54 such stations in September of that year. Again, there were some right here in New York. Now, they note that its new release, dubbed Patrol and Persuade, focuses on the scale of the network and examines the role that joint policing initiatives between China and several European nations, including Italy, Croatia, Serbia, and Romania, have played in piloting a wider expansion of Chinese overseas stations that was unknown until the organization's revelations came out. Now, this is important because the CCP appears to be carrying out a large-scale operation with this push for global policing. The systems of working with governments and training their police forces goes hand in hand with these secret police stations. The CCP is using the open trainings and open programs with countries to even further its agenda for the secret ones. It's establishing these networks through open agreements where it can. And where it can't, it's setting up underground police stations in these countries. But overall, it appears the same goal is in place. The Chinese Communist Party, through this so-called policing initiative, is trying to export the China model. And this includes exporting its use of persecution, its use of threats to dissidents, the exporting of its, again, human rights abuses onto foreign soil, and the exporting as well of the brutal and corrupt practices of its communist regime into other countries. Well, everyone, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, please help get the word out, share this episode. As always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free.